Captain America, the super soldier, the peak of physical perfection. What's going on, everyone? Today we are going to look into kind of a character that not really interested me myself too much until the movies came out, and that was of Captain America. Personally, not being American, as a kid, the character did not really interest me too much. If I'm honest, then Chris Evans and the MCU turned up, and I started to look into this character a bit more. It has an incredible backstory. The 616 universe, Captain America, is interesting, let's put it that way. So I figured, let's look back and see how many people have worn the cowl of Captain America. And it turns out this character has had many, many, many different people take up that moniker. So let's get into it and look through them all. Let's get started with the OG Captain America, Mr. Steve Rogers. Okay, so Steve Rogers, we should all know this one by now. Skinny boy, originally rejected by the military due to health issues. He volunteered for Project Rebirth, where he receives the super soldier serum, all the S's. His body is transformed into the peak of physical perfection. He battled Hydra and the Red Skull on many occasions during World War II itself, alongside his sidekick Bucky Barnes, basically until big accident. He is frozen away in the ice in 1945. Everyone suspects that he is dead. He ends up being frozen in the ice for 20 years before he is found and thawed out. Now, it is in that 20-year period we get some interesting variations on this character. Next character we will look at is Isaiah Bradley. Basically, in an attempt to recreate the formula used on Steve, a scientist tests his basically altered version of the super soldier serum on African Americans. He took away 300 of them and subjected them to the trials. Now, only 5 of these managed to survive the trials, and in then after a few field missions, Bradley himself was the sole survivor, so he ended up getting injected with this super soldier serum. Now, realizing that he was just a test dummy, he ends up going on a suicide mission to destroy a Hydra base, who themselves are trying to work on their own super soldier serum. Unfortunately, he is captured. With the intent basically to cut him up, find out and reverse engineer this formula. Now, a few German insurgents find him, and he is captured, and then he is then arrested and court-martialed by the American government. He ends up being pardoned by President Eisenhower, but he did spend 17 years in jail. So it's one of these that's not really talked about too much. He is known as the Black Captain America. A lot of the heroes know him as sort of like a legend around and about. Falcon knows of him, obviously. Black Panther, Storm, apparently at their wedding, he was a guest of honor. William Naslund. Now, when Steve Rogers was assumed dead in 1945, President Truman sought to keep the idea of Captain America alive. He requested that William be the next captain. He was originally known as a character called the Spirit of 76. Basically, after appointment by Truman, they announced the death of Steve and Bucky, and William was appointed in front of the media. He met his death at the hands of Adam 2, which was an android robot, so he didn't last too long. Next up, we have Jeffrey Mace. Originally known as the Patriot, Mace was great friends with Naslund and was actually there when he died. He took over the mantle in his honor. Next up, William Burnside. So, William was only 11 when Cap first appeared for the war. He was obsessed with Captain, as most kids were back in the day. Even wrote his thesis on Cap when he went to uni. He travelled to Germany to discover basically Nazi stories about Captain and how they dealt with fighting him. He actually ends up finding Kerfoot's work and his incomplete super soldier serum, not realizing it was incomplete. He returns to the States. Jeffrey Mace at the time was retiring from being Captain America, and they realized they needed a new Cap. Basically, there was a lot going on at the time. There was the Korean War, and they thought maybe they need a Captain America to give them some hope. Well, William himself decided he would take on the role only if they accepted him, because he had that formula. As he was obsessed with Captain America, he actually changed his name to Steve Rogers, had plastic surgery to look like Steve Rogers, and yeah, tried to basically live his life. Unfortunately, the formula that he gave had some psychotic symptoms attached to it. He became paranoid, unreliable, basically losing focus. He had to get put into suspended animation after he caused too much issues. Next up, Roscoe Simmons. In a period where Steve Rogers had become the Nomad, great character, Roscoe Simmons took up the role. Originally, he failed, though, to become captain, but the Falcon saw that he was trying and trained him as much as he could to become a good version of Captain America. Unfortunately, it didn't last long, as in a battle with the Red Skull realized that he was not Steve Rogers straight away and basically killed him, crucified him, tortured him, basically to send a message to the real Steve Rogers. Okay, now one we're all a bit familiar with after the Captain and Winter Soldier TV show. John Walker. Basically, he got powers through the Power Broker system, enhanced his strength. He was a former veteran, so he had great combat skill. He took up the mantle of Cap when Steve retired. However, it wouldn't be long before Captain America would return to action, so Steve took back his role and John became the US agent, a role we'll see him portray in the Thunderbolts movie. Alright, and we're still going. Next up, Bucky Barnes. When Steve Rogers is seemingly killed off by hypnotized Sharon Carter, Stark is to appoint a new Captain America because they need a face under that mask. Bucky steals that shield because he doesn't want it passed down to anyone, because the shield is very important to him. However, it is made clear to him that Steve had actually told Tony a long time ago that the role should go to Barnes. Accepting this, Barnes adopted the new Captain America mantle. As he wasn't a super soldier, they made a new uniform for him, laced with adamantium to compensate for all his strength. Sam Wilson. So after Steve Rogers is aged into an old man, he appoints Wilson as the new Cap. He was in this role basically up until Secret Empire, where we got good versus evil Steve Rogers with the Cosmic Cubes, Hydra Steve. I mean, I thought it was a good story. I would love to see more of Evil Cap. I know if he's your poster boy, you don't want to see your character corrupted, but it was a good villain in my opinion. But after that, he went back to becoming the Falcon. Alright, and that was the list of 616 versions of Captain America. However, there are a few honourable mentions I'll quickly run through, just in case you think I've forgotten them. There was Butch Cartwell, basically a mobster who dressed as Captain America to make rhymes. That was a one-issue thing. Carl Zanti, villain of the original Human Torch, he dressed as Cap again to steal a car. Danielle Cage, a future Captain America. She is the daughter of Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. Roberta Mendez from Earth 23291. Samantha Wilson, Earth 65. Peggy Carter, Captain America, as you've seen from the What Ifs. One that I quite like here, Scott Summers, Captain America, 81122. Basically, after an experiment, took Scott's genes and Captain's powers away. Steve ends up aging. We've had that story before, but still, Scott Summers decides to take up the mantle of Captain America after this in honor of Captain America. And finally, one I quite like as well, Frank Castle, Captain America. That's right, the Punisher. So in Universe 81223, when the U.S. falls into chaos and they decide that they need a new Captain America, Tony Stark is part of the Illuminati. They convince Frank, aka the Punisher, to become the new Captain America. As he is already super strong in his own way through training, he becomes a far stronger, more superior version of Cap and dishes out his own Frank Castle style justice. Okay, and thank you for listening. These were basically the 616 Captain Americas and a few of the extra ones there that I quite enjoyed. Let me know if I missed any out. Let me know, apart from Steve, obviously, who was your favourite Captain America? Which ones would you like to see portrayed throughout the MCU? I know we've already seen a few, or had names like, say, William Mace thrown at us, John Walker. We've got Sam Wilson, Captain America at the moment. Bucky Barnes is around, but I don't think they'll put the Captain America robe on him yet. Just a few shield tosses. And yeah, thank you for listening to me.